You've done nothing wrong, but your body already feels guilty. Someone just asked, "Hey, you okay?" A completely normal question, and somehow you're already building a defense. That reaction happened before you even realized it was happening. Nobody accused you of anything. No evidence, no case. But somewhere in you, a trial just started. By the end of this video, you'll understand why. Think about the last time you turned someone down or simply took something good for yourself, a day off, a compliment, a win, and immediately felt like you owed someone an apology for it. Not because you did anything wrong, because some quiet part of you is always half braced for the accusation, even when nobody's making one. If that's familiar, you're not overly sensitive. Something in you learned this a long time ago, and one question has been running on repeat ever since. Did I do something wrong? Most people call this being a good, conscientious person. You're just so considerate. It gets treated like a moral strength. But live inside it, and it doesn't feel like strength. It feels like a verdict that arrives before the trial even starts. Strip everything else away, and it comes down to one line. Feeling guilty without doing anything wrong isn't a strong conscience. For many people, it reflects a nervous system that learned other people's feelings were partly its job to manage. This shows up in two clear shapes. The over-apologizer says sorry on reflex, bumped into by someone else, apologizes anyway. The word leaves before the brain's even decided it's necessary. The boundary guilt type says no, then spends the next hour rehearsing softer ways they could have said it instead. Setting a limit doesn't feel like self-respect. It feels like an offense they need to make up for. Notice which one your chest reacted to first. Which one are you? Over-apologizer or boundary guilt type? Drop it below, even one word. Picture someone we'll call Priya. Growing up, her mother's mood was the weather of the entire house. When her mother was low, the air itself seemed to change. Young Priya learned something else too. When her mother was upset, Priya often believed it had something to do with something she'd done or failed to do. Decades later, a close friend texts her at 11 p.m., clearly upset, asking for a favor on a night Priya is genuinely exhausted. She types, "I'm sorry, I can't tonight," sends it, and immediately feels sick. She refreshes the chat 4 times in 10 minutes. Her friend replies 30 seconds later, completely fine. Priya still doesn't feel better because she's not reacting to her friend's text. She's reacting to a much older alarm, the one that taught her long before she could name it that someone else's bad mood was information about something she'd done. She's not guilty tonight because she did anything wrong. She's guilty because her nervous system never got the update that her mother's moods weren't necessarily about her. And it's still asking the same question. Did I do something wrong? Here's what's rarely said out loud. The same wiring that makes you feel guilty over nothing can also contribute to being genuinely thoughtful. You notice pain before it's spoken. You care about impact, not just intention. That's not just guilt running in the background. That's empathy. It's just currently pointed at threats that mostly aren't there anymore. Of course, people arrive at this pattern through different roads. This is one common pathway, not the only one. Psychologist Tangney's research on moral emotions draws a clear line. Shame says, I am bad. Guilt says, I did something bad. Guilt on its own is healthy. It's what makes people repair relationships. The problem isn't guilt itself, it's guilt firing at things that were never actually your responsibility. Family therapist Salvador Minuchin described enmeshment as a family pattern where emotional boundaries become blurred. In some enmeshed families, a child can gradually come to feel responsible for a parent's emotional well-being, and that responsibility can follow them into adulthood, showing up as guilt even when nothing's actually wrong. Put simply, healthy guilt asks, did I hurt someone? Learned guilt asks, is someone upset? Those are not the same question, and it rarely gets questioned because it looks like virtue. People who experience unnecessary guilt are often described as considerate, humble. The praise reinforces the exact wiring that started as a child trying to keep the peace. It isn't a moral flaw, it's an old alarm. still doing the job it learned, aimed at a threat that, in most cases, isn't there anymore. There's a decent chance you just watched the feeling you've carried your whole life get explained back to you. That's exactly what this channel is here to do. If you haven't already, subscribe. And if you drop your type in the comments, go reply to someone else's. You're far from the only one who does this. If this felt familiar, it's worth knowing the same wiring shows up in more places than guilt. One of the most watched patterns on this channel is about people who stay completely silent and somehow still come out ahead. Worth watching if you haven't. But there's another version of this wiring that doesn't look like guilt at all. Someone who's technically resting but never actually relaxing, because part of them still isn't convinced it's safe to stop. Why can some people never truly relax, even when there's nothing left to do? That's next.